Imagine you find a house in Florida. You look at the listing and see what everyone looking for real estate in the Sunshine State wants to see. A low asking price, maybe some fresh paint, palm trees in the yard, no state income tax. You look at it and you think, what is wrong with it? Because at these prices, in this market, something has to be wrong with it. And you're right. But the answer isn't in the listing description. The listing description is there to sell you a dream. Today, we are doing a forensic audit on 6 properties across Florida, all of them sitting on the market for anywhere from a year to over 2 years. For each one, there is a very specific, very expensive liability the market figured out before you did. We're going to bypass the marketing spin, ignore the cosmetic upgrades, and break down the exact math and infrastructure failures that are making buyers quietly walk away. And to show you just how deep these red flags can get, we are going to look at these properties in order starting with the house that has been sitting for the least amount of time, and working our way up to the absolute longest. By the time we hit the end of this list, you will see exactly the kind of toxic liability it takes for a property to sit completely untouched for years. Let's go through them. We start at 473 days on the market, 915 Club Circle, Lakeshore, Florida, listed for $99,900/$99. This is a 1965 one-bedroom, one-bathroom villa. And to be clear, this is not a 55-plus restricted community. Anyone can buy it. It has a $290 a month HOA fee. But here is the detail that the listing is using as its main selling point. It comes with a tenant already locked into a 1-year lease, paying $975 a month. Guaranteed income, right? You buy the place for under $100,000, and on day 1, someone is handing you almost $1,000 a month. It sounds like the easiest real estate investment in the world, but the math is entirely toxic. In real estate investing, an inherited tenant is only a bonus if the numbers actually make sense. Let's do the math that the market is already doing. Your gross monthly income is $975. Right off the top, you owe the HOA $290. Your property taxes will be roughly $85 a month. Property insurance, assuming a very conservative rate for Florida, will be at least $150 a month. If you use a property manager, that's another 10%, or $97. And you have to set aside at least 8% for maintenance reserves and vacancy, which is another $78. Your total operating expenses are roughly $700 a month. You take your $975 in rent, subtract your $700 in expenses, and your net operating income is exactly $275 a month. Now, how are you buying this property? If you are a financed investor, you are putting 20% down, about $20,000, and financing the remaining $80,000. At a conservative 6.5% investment loan rate, your principal and interest payment to the bank is about $505 a month. So, you are netting $275 from the property, but you have to write a check to the bank for $505. You are bleeding $230 every single month just for the privilege of owning this villa. But what if you pay cash? What if you drop $100,000 to avoid the mortgage entirely? Your net operating income is still $275 a month, which comes out to $3,300 a year. On a $100,000 cash investment, that is a 3.3% cash-on-cash return. Right now, any sane investor can take that exact same $100,000, park it in a risk-free, high-yield savings account or a U.S. Treasury bill, and make 5% without lifting a finger. Nobody in their right mind is going to risk catastrophic HOA special assessments on a 60-year-old building just to make a miserable 3.3% return. The $975 lease isn't a bonus. It is a financial anchor. Moving up to 527 days on the market. 45,202 NFS Road, number 572B, Altoona, Florida. This one is completely different from the others. Usually, when a rural, off-grid property sits on the market for this long, it's because the physical infrastructure is a disaster. But here, the infrastructure is actually dialed in. The listing states it features updated 2022 wiring. It has a 2-inch well with a dedicated pump house. It has a newer drain field. It features an outdoor shower. The cabin is even equipped with Starlink internet. It sounds like the perfect turnkey, off-grid retreat. So why has it been sitting for over 500 days? Because of the dirt it sits on. NFS stands for National Forest Service. This cabin is situated on a 3/4 acre tract of U.S. forestry land. When you buy this listing, you will never hold the deed to the land. You are merely purchasing an interest in the structure itself. To live there, the buyer must apply for a special use recreational permit and acquire approval before the sale can even close. These permits are only issued for 20 years and must be renewed. Furthermore, cabin owners have to abide by strict rules and regulations set in place by the federal government. But here's the part that kills the deal. The timeline for a permit transfer is approximately 1 year out, and the buyer must submit an in-depth financial report to the Forestry Service at the time the application is submitted. You aren't buying a piece of real estate. You are buying a heavily regulated, depreciating asset on federal land. You are agreeing to hand over your financial life to the government, abide by their strict forestry rules, and wait up to 12 months just to get the keys. And at the end of the day, you don't even own the ground beneath your feet. Moving deeper into the timeline. 1058 North Davis Avenue, Lakeland, Florida. $125,900. 552 days on the market. Lakeland is a prime location, sitting right along the I-4 corridor between Tampa and Orlando. It is a growing market. Houses here at this price point should not sit for a year and a half. On paper, the seller is pushing a very specific narrative. The listing boasts about new flooring and an updated HVAC system. They want you to see an affordable, move-in ready starter home. But the reality is entirely about the footprint. This is a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom property built in 1955. And it is incredibly small, just 564 square feet. To put that into perspective, a standard 2-car garage is about 400 square feet. You are essentially looking at a shed on a corner lot. The listing might try to highlight a bonus room to make it feel larger, but on a layout this severely limited, a bonus room almost always signals a cramped, unpermitted enclosure, rather than actual, functional, climate-controlled space. Buyers are looking at the $125,900 price tag. Then they are looking at the 564 square feet, and they are doing the math. The price per square foot simply does not match the extreme lack of livable interior space. You cannot finance potential if the potential doesn't physically fit on the lot. 552 days is the market's way of saying this house needs room to breathe, and it just doesn't have it. Approaching the 600-day mark in the Panhandle. 122 Alice Street, Pensacola, Florida. $127,000. 597 days on the market. The history on this one is important. This 1954 build was purchased in March 2024 for $95,000. It is now listed at $127,000. The listing actually admits it offers an opportunity for modern updates. That is listing language. It is a quiet, polite way of saying the investor who bought it gave up. It is an unfinished flip. But an unfinished flip is not the real reason this house has sat for over 500 days. You can finish a kitchen, you can lay down laminate flooring. What you cannot fix is the dirt underneath it. The real problem here is environmental. Data shows this specific parcel has a massive 62 to 76% estimated chance of severe flooding over the next 30 years. That is not a minor drainage issue in the backyard. That is catastrophic water intrusion. And in the state of Florida, where the property insurance market is currently in a state of absolute crisis, a flood risk that high is the kiss of death for a real estate transaction. When a retail buyer tries to purchase this home, their mortgage lender is going to require comprehensive flood insurance. And the premiums for a 1950s house in a severe flood zone are going to be astronomical. Those unaffordable insurance premiums get added to the monthly payment, the buyer's debt-to-income ratio spikes, and the conventional financing deal falls apart. It happens every single time. The flipper who bought it in March 2024 likely figured it out too late, crossing the 600-day threshold, 3,818 West Lloyd Street, Pensacola, Florida. 614 days on the market. This is a 1942 home. You might look at the exterior photo, the classic cottage styling, the mature trees, the paved driveway, and think it just needs a little bit of polish. a weekend warrior project. But a visual audit of the interior tells a very different, very expensive story. This is not a fresh flip that just missed the mark. This is what I call a deferred maintenance time capsule. When you look closely at the photos, you see a distinct, untouched 1950s kitchen layout. You see heavily worn, deeply aged carpet stretching throughout almost every single room in the house. This property requires a massive cash injection just to modernize the aesthetics. You have to rip up the floors, tear out the cabinets, and update the fixtures before it even looks like a modern home. But cosmetics are cheap. The real trap of a 1942 time capsule is what you can't see. If the kitchen hasn't been touched in 70 years, the skeleton hasn't been touched either. Whoever buys this is taking on the heavy, uninsurable burden of 80-year-old plumbing and electrical systems hiding behind those plaster walls. We are talking about potential knob and tube wiring, cast iron pipes that have rusted shut, and foundation settling that hasn't been addressed since World War II. Buyers are walking away because the asking price does not leave any room for the heavy rehab budget required to bring this property up to a standard that a bank will lend on. And finally, the property that has been sitting the longest out of any home we are looking at today. 6,530 Julia Drive, Milton, Florida. 756 days on the market. This is a 1975 brick home. It started on the market at $219,900. Over the last 2 years, it has plummeted down to $149,900. That is a $70,000 haircut. The listing explicitly states it is being sold as is. Now, as is a standard phrase in real estate. It usually just means the seller isn't going to fix a leaky faucet or patch a hole in the drywall before closing. But a property from the mid-70s sitting for 700 days with an as-is tag means something is fundamentally, structurally broken. In Florida, an as-is house from 1975 that nobody will touch at a $70,000 discount means major, uninsurable systems have failed. Buyers doing their due diligence are likely finding out that this house has a completely collapsed septic system that will cost $20,000 to replace, or it has aluminum wiring, which was incredibly common in the mid-70s and is now considered a massive fire hazard that Florida insurance companies will refuse to write a policy for, or it has polybutylene plumbing that is actively leaking behind the brick. The market ran the numbers on replacing the roof, the wires, and the pipes, realized it would cost more than the house is worth, and walked away. 6 properties, 6 different cities, 3,519 combined days on the market. That is over 9 years of listings that the market looked at, ran the numbers on, and quietly walked away from. The market is usually right, it just never explains itself. If you spotted something in any of these listings that I missed, or if you think the market is wrong about one of them, tell me in the comments. I read them all, and I will see you in the next one.